Thank you for tuning in and welcome back, team. In today's episode of Home Buying Tips, you'll learn about making an offer on a house. My name is Andrew Finney, your real estate geek. If you need help finding a top agent where you live, or if you simply want to drop me a line to say hello, my contact info is below. If you haven't already done so, please go ahead and subscribe to this channel now and like this video. Thank you. Okay, team, so let's talk about this. There's generally 4 questions that come up anytime somebody's thinking about writing an offer. And I'm sure that you could relate to this if you've already bought a home and made an offer, or if you're going through the process now and contemplating, should I be writing an offer right now? So the first question that normally comes to mind is, how much should I offer, right? That's a great question. The second one is my offer too high or is it too low? Will it insult the seller? The third is, are there competing offers? Are we getting ourselves into a bidding war, right? And the fourth, of course, is always, will it appraise? We got to have that home appraisal come in because you can't get more loan than the appraised value. So in today's video, we're going to review 3 main points. And after this video, you'll have the answer to those 4 questions, plus many more answers to questions you may not be considering just yet. Okay, so the 3 main points that we're going to look at is forgetting the list price and focusing on what a house is worth. The second is the importance of a comparative market analysis for buying a home. And the third is actually writing the offer with the devil being in the details. So let's take a look at the first point. The first main point here is forgetting the list price and what's the house really worth. The reason we want to forget the list price is because if somebody lists a home for $500,000, right? And let's say that the market really says that home's worth about $475,000 according to recent sales and everything around it, the seller could actually ask for as much money as they want. If they wanted to put that $500,000 house on the market for $5 million, they could. But if the appraisal comes in at $475,000, then that's a big problem, right? So you can only get as much home loan as the appraised value. So forget the list price and focus on what a house is really worth. Your trusted real estate advisor will be happy to perform a comparative market analysis for you to assist you in knowing exactly what that home should be selling for with an estimated fair market range and what it's likely to appraise for. You want to focus on what the house is actually worth, not what you as a buyer want to say, oh, I'd love to get that $500,000 house for $450,000 when the market is $475,000, right? And you don't want to be paying $500,000 for that house if it's only worth $475,000. Focus on what the house is really worth and try as best as you can to put emotion to the side and focus on what's going to come to your bottom line at the end of the day. That brings us actually to point 2, right? Which is the comparative market analysis. We want to break everything down by the numbers. Now, oftentimes whenever I work with buyers here in Las Vegas, Nevada, they say, Andrew, okay, what are we going to do when we make an offer on a house? So that's a great question. The first thing we're going to do after we've isolated those 3 to 5 homes you want to go see, and maybe you want make an offer on 1 to 3 of those homes depending on how well those showings go, right? The next thing that I'm going to do is actually perform a comparative market analysis. In performing the comparative market analysis, I'm going to be taking a look at specifically the condition of the home that we were looking at, and I'm going to look for other homes in similar condition, size, features, the age of the home, and the location of the home. I'm going to be checking through the active listings, pending listings, and expired listings, and of course the sold data to see what's going on. I'm going to be checking on market trends and neighborhood specific demand, and then I'm going to put it into a report so I can see what's going on in that area and share it with my client. Now, generally, whenever I'm looking at, there's essentially like 7 main points that I'm looking at whenever I am performing comparative market analysis. And whenever I'm doing that, going back to essentially what a comparative market analysis is and some of the criteria, I'm also using very exacting criteria for similar and what's considered comparable homes. Essentially, if you have a home that's 3,000 square feet, I'm going to be looking at homes down to 2,700 square feet and homes up to 3,300 square feet. So essentially a 10% margin right there. And then you're going to average out the price per square foot. And I'm looking for the sold closing data within the last 90 days. So it's very, very important. There's so much information that goes in that. I know that's a lot for you, but this is what your trusted real estate advisor should be doing for you whenever you get ready to write an offer, to make sure you're not overpaying and you know exactly how to answer question number 1, how much should you offer? And also answering question number 2 from the beginning of this video, is my offer too high or low? You'll know with the comparative market analysis. The second influencing factor, it comes into your buyer motivation. Once we establish what a home is worth, you can determine what a home is worth to you. So are your needs insanely specific and you've been looking for months and months and months to find the right home, the one that's just perfect for you? Well, you might decide to pay a higher price rather than losing out on the home that would be ideal for you, and it might take you another 3, 6, 9, 12 months to find. In the meantime, homes are going up, and so are mortgage interest rates. It's a no-win situation there. So otherwise, you might be looking at homes based upon your commute, your lifestyle, quality of schools, potential resale value. If you're just looking to get into your first home and you want to buy that first home and then resell it in 5 to 7 years to get in the home that you want to get into. Maybe property condition is important to you. Maybe property maintenance costs are important to you. So a newer home would be more appeal to you because they're newer. Everything inside the house is going to require less maintenance typically. Or maybe you're considering the market conditions in your area. So if there's like a strong seller's market in your area, the inventory is low, a better option might be hard to come by because there's so few homes and so many buyers. That takes you into the third segment of underneath comparative market analysis and writing an offer. It's understanding whether you're in a seller's market or a buyer's market. And just so that you know what these markets are, if you're in a seller's market, what happens is there's less homes available on the market than there are buyers in the market. So there's far more buyers than there are homes available for sale. That increases the demand for those homes. So if you have 1,000 homes and you've got 2,000 buyers in the market, then you have 1,000 buyers that are going to be left without a home and only 1,000 that are going to be getting that home. That's what causes the multiple bids. Now, the reverse is true if you're looking at a buyer's market. In a buyer's market, there's far more homes available for sale than there are buyers in the market. So they use the same numbers for an easy comparison. If you have 2,000 homes available for sale and only 1,000 buyers in the market, then you're in a strong buyer's market, okay? Hope that helps you make a little bit more sense of a seller's market and buyer's market when you hear those terms thrown around. Now, the fourth consideration that you would take a look at is actually considering your days on market, often annotated as DOM for days on market. Why is this important to you as a home buyer? If you need to get a home and you need to be able to negotiate maybe specifically favorable terms in terms of asking a seller to help you out with your buyer closing costs, I want you to keep something in mind when it comes to buyer closing costs, and I'll make this point in the third main topic of this video. With buyer closing costs, they're called what? What did I just say? Buyer closing cost, right? They're closing costs for who? The buyer. So you need to be prepared for that, and it's generally 2% to 4% of the home's sales price. So going back to our example of that $500,000 home, if you're going to be paying buyer closing costs, then you need to be prepared for 2% to 4% of that value towards your buyer closing costs, which is on top of your down payment amount, okay? Something important, I'll reiterate the point when we get in the main topic number 3, okay? But it's something for you to know about. So going back to days on market, why am I bringing up buyer closing costs and days on market if it's a buyer closing cost, right? Because sellers have seller closing costs, and again, seller closing costs. Closing costs for who? Seller, right? So back on point with days on market. Days on market, the longer the days on market, the more negotiable the seller may become. There's generally a couple of different type of people out there that have higher days on market. Number one is the people that might be really firm on their price and they're not negotiable, in which case they probably won't sell their home, and it'll become what's called an expired listing, meaning that it went off the market without selling. Or there's people that want to sell a home, but for some reason the market's just not as attractive to their home. Maybe the showing conditions are difficult to view the property. Maybe there's specific situations going on with that property. So the higher the days on market, generally the more negotiable a seller will become. So you need to know what your average days on market are before a home typically goes into the closing process in your area. Your trusted real estate advisor will know that. So then let's say that number was like 70 days on market before it goes into the closing process, right? So if you start seeing homes that are on the market for like 100 days, then those homes at the 100-day point might have more negotiable sellers. If you like that home, that seller might be more open to helping you with your buyer closing costs or more favorable terms to you, from reduction of the price to, again, terms, right? So it's something important for you to remember. Days on market are very, very important. The fifth point that we'll be making is on the competing homes. So if you have a lot of competition in and around the homes that you like, and you have competing homes. It's pretty interesting because an observation that I've made whenever I've listed property for sellers is actually if that home that I'm selling for the seller is located anywhere within about a half a mile radius to a 1 mile radius of new home construction, then we're going to experience some higher days on market by virtue of being in direct competition with brand new home construction. So it's very interesting. So if there's competing homes and the other homes look better, right, then might increase the days on market for the homes that don't look as good as the ones that are turnkey, move-in ready. In other words, the ones that are fully upgraded, the ones that are ready to move in, and you could just drop your furniture and get right into living your lifestyle the way that you please. So whenever you're in a neighborhood like that, the seller, if they have a lot of competition, has to be more flexible in terms of pricing, a little bit more negotiable in as far as terms are concerned, and maybe offering you home warranties, maybe assisting you with buyer closing costs or other terms that might be favorable to you and also help them get what they want as well. If a seller doesn't have a lot of competition in the community, then they could probably ask for what they want. If a community generally only has a handful of sales a year and that's a community that's right for you, then you're probably going to be facing stiff competition on that home, just so you know, okay? So then we take a look at the the seventh one actually. I know I skipped one in here. I'm not sure which one that it was. I apologize about that, by the way. So I made a mistake on my numbering, so I apologize. There's actually 6 points, not 7. So the sixth one is actually the seller's motivations. And in the seller's motivations, what we're looking at, some sellers might be selling due to financial problems. They could be having a divorce. They could be getting a job relocation. They could be upgrading a home. They could be downsizing a home. Or the owners are just trying to unload what for them has become a nightmare of a home, where just a hot mess, right? And you don't want to be buying someone else's hot mess. I'm sure that you've heard the term fire sale. They do actually happen. And when I say fire sale, I'm not saying that the house burned up and it's literally like a fire and then a sale of the property. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about whenever you see everything around that area sells for like $475,000, and here's this seller going on the market with a really nice house of like $400,000, or a home that looks really nice, and they're dropping it at $400,000. That's somebody that is just wanting a very, very, very rapid sell because of whatever dynamics they have going on in their life. They're not that common, but they do happen from time to time. So it's important to understand the seller's motivations in as much as possible. As I've mentioned in several different videos, the best person to try to get that information for you is your trusted real estate advisor. When you're in the home, if the seller happens to be present, it's typically not best to ask them as a buyer because it could be off-putting. Kind of put yourself in their shoes and see how and think about how you would respond if somebody you didn't know entered your house and then asked you, why are you selling? What's going on with your motivations, right? It's kind of like, what? No. Not going to have that conversation, right? But if you ask your trusted real estate advisor to see if they can find out, what will happen is that they will talk to the listing agent and see if there's anything that's going on with the situation to learn more about the property and then report it back to you, okay? So now the third point is actually getting into writing the offer. Now, in writing an offer, it's crucially important to remember the devil is in the details. Sales price, the offer price, in other words, is only one aspect of a contract. There are so many other aspects as far as contingencies, conditions, and terms of the contract. So the contract, you have essentially the price, and then you have the terms. The devil's in the details with these terms. So let's take a look at what gets a lot of attention other than the sales price, right? Or what should get a lot of attention other than a sales price being the amount that you're offering, so we can figure out what can make and break a deal and be a little bit more negotiable, a little bit more flexible as the cases may be, or a little bit more stringent depending on what your situation is and what you're looking for in your new home with the terms. So then the first one is actually a financing type. With the financing type, you have FHA, USDA, VA loans, and conventional loans. And then what happens is some sellers may say, okay, I know that my home may not pass what's called health and safety conditions for like an FHA or VA or USDA loan, since they're all federally insured, right? So they may not even be offering it to that. They may say, I can only accept cash or conventional given my property's condition. In many cases, you'll find properties that are probably sellers that are open to all of it, which is a smart decision for a seller to make, so they have more opportunity to take different financing types to purchase their home. But if the home cannot meet the muster for those federally insured loans, especially as it pertains to minimum property requirements, then, and the seller doesn't have the money to bring it up, okay, then they might not do it. So financing type is number one. The second one is an earnest money deposit. Now, an earnest money deposit is probably easiest to understand as a good faith deposit for the seller to take the home off the market and show them that you have skin in the game, that you're willing to move forward and close on that property, okay? So it's kind of like a security deposit. You're gonna see it again when you get ready to close, so long as all the conditions and contingencies are met within the contract and there's no breach on your side of that contract, which is what we're going through right now with the terms, right? So if you want to plan out your earnest money deposit, that's something that you're going to pay once you go into the closing process. Typically, an earnest money deposit is between 1% and 3% of the list price. So going back to our $500,000 home example, you could expect the earnest money deposit requested to be between $5,000 and $15,000. So if you didn't want to put up $15,000, you can actually just say, hey, I'll give you $5,000 as a show of good faith. Please take your house off the market and let's get the ball rolling in the closing process, right? Something that is negotiable there as well. Everything in a contract is essentially negotiable, right? So the next one is moving into your inspection period. How many days do you need to complete your buyer due diligence? It's pretty common, at least here in Las Vegas and different parts of the country, where you say, okay, 10 days is more than enough time. Some areas of the country might say 14, 15 days may be more customary. It's really going to just depend on what's customary in your area. So talk to your trusted real estate advisor about how long inspection periods generally last. During the inspection period, I like to just normally call this buyer due diligence because you're actually performing the home inspection, you're submitting repair requests, you're getting any questions answered if there was an addition to the property, seeing if their permits were pulled on it, and you're also ordering the home appraisal. So there's different things going on, so I normally just call it buyer due diligence. In this case, we'll refer to it as, you can call it as buyer due diligence or inspection period, whatever's easiest for you. So then you actually go into getting that home inspection report back from the home inspector within that period of time, 10 to 14 days, right? And start looking at asking the seller for repairs, right? So now consider that this is called a repair request. It's very important to think about some of the semantics I'm using here. A repair request is a what? A request, right? So we're asking the seller to repair X, Y, and Z on the property, right? Does that mean that the seller has to do it? No. Does it mean that they should or ideally would? Yes. It does mean that ideally they would fix all these things, so long as they're not like a whole bunch of cosmetic stuff. What we're really looking at are bigger things here that might be cause an issue for the financing type that you might have and might have to be done to stay in compliance with the minimum property requirements of the loan type that you have. The other thing we're looking at are any other things that you might want to get corrected other than cosmetic issues. Let's say like a GFCI circuit is out. Then obviously we would like to get the GFCI circuit fixed, right? Or let's say there's a leaky faucet. Well, maybe we want to get that fixed, right? So we put those type of things into the repair request using the home inspection report from your home inspector, so the seller and the listing agent can both look at it as well and see what's going on. A lot of cases, it's not because the seller just didn't perform home maintenance, they just might not have known. And you know, a home inspection report goes over essentially like 1,600 different checklist items in most home inspections. So there's a lot of stuff there that we as homeowners don't always think about, right? So then the next one is actually your down payment. So with your down payment, you need to be prepared from that. And from the seller's perspective, a buyer that has a bigger down payment of cash is more likely highly qualified and more likely to close. So if you do have that bigger down payment amount, sometimes that can really stick out in the mind's eye of a prospective seller. Now, obviously, people are different and every case and situation is different and unique, but yet sometimes that's what happens, right? So just think about that as well. Now, moving on to the next term of a offer, you're looking at your closing cost and what you're asking for in prepaids. Now, this is what I was talking about out of the main topic number 2 in this episode, was actually the buyer closing costs, right? So with your buyer closing costs, your buyer closing costs are going to generally range between 2% and 4% of a sales price. I normally share with the clients I work with here in Las Vegas, Nevada, plan on like 3% of a sales price. That should be pretty good. Now, if you're looking at 4%, then that would largely depend on whether you're buying points with your mortgage And also, if if you live in a state that requires an attorney to be party to the transaction, then it might include their fee in there as well. Now, generally 3% is a pretty safe rule of thumb. So back to our $500,000 home, that says that you should be prepared to pay $15,000 in buyer closing costs. $500,000 times 3%, right? $15,000. So this would be your buyer closing cost above and beyond what your down payment on the house is going to be. Okay, so and at this point, I'll make a really quick down and dirty example going back to your earnest money deposit, because I know I've talked to several people that have contacted us on our channel and from our community here, and they've been a little bit concerned what happens to the earnest money deposit, right? So let's use the $500,000 house as an example. Let's say that you put $5,000 up front, and let's say that you have a 3% down conventional loan on that property. So that means that your total down payment is $15,000. Now, let's say that you're also paying all your buyer closing costs, which is 3% of the price, so another $15,000. So that's a total sum of $30,000 that needs to be paid between the down payment and your buyer closing cost. And you put $5,000 of it up front as your earnest money deposit. So when you get to closing table, whenever it comes time to close on that property, what that means is you'll take that $5,000 of the earnest money deposit and subtract it from the $30,000 balance due, and that means that you'll have $25,000 that you'll need to be prepared to pay for as cash to close at the end of the transaction, okay? So I hope that makes a little bit better sense of that for you. Then the next term that we look at are like title policies. You know, it's very customary for a seller to pay the owner's title policy and the buyer to pay the lender's policy, but the terms are always negotiable, right? It is customary, though, for sellers to pay their own owner's policy and you as a buyer to pay your lender policy, okay? Now, closing and possession timeframes. This is known as close of escrow, or at the end of the closing process, essentially when you get the keys to your new home, right? So when you're looking at that, it just really depends. In a seller's market, if you're in a seller's market, you might want to ask your trusted real estate advisor to do some super sleuthing if they can, and find out if there's any specific terms that the seller would like to see in a contract. Let's say that that seller is selling that home, but then they're becoming a buyer. Maybe they're buying new construction. Maybe they're moving out of state. Maybe they need a temporary, what's called lease back, essentially renting the house back from you, the buyer, after closing for a period of time. And maybe that's the term they're really looking for, more than the price, more than anything else. They're looking for that term. It's very common, especially as markets pick up and they go in the seller's market, for people to be selling a home, needing a place to go, and needing some time to actually find that home, not become homeless in the process, and close on their new home as well. So the buyer that's purchasing their home that gives the seller the favorable terms can sometimes win just by sheer virtue of convenience to the seller, and it'll really help them out, which will help you out, because now you're not out there competing with all these different bids, right? Something to think about. There's a lot of things that can go into that. So at the close of escrow, or essentially when you get the keys to your house, right? So then a contingency. I've made a video just about contingencies. Common contingencies include like appraisals, appraisal contingencies, financing contingencies, home inspection contingencies. There's so many different kinds of contingencies that could be had. Discuss those with your trusted real estate advisor in your area and see what's going on with the contingencies and what kind you should have to protect your best interest as you write your offer. Now, this has been an extremely in-depth video about making an offer on a home. We've covered a lot of information on this video, and good on you for making it this far into the episode. Now it's your turn. Tell me what you're thinking about this video in the comment section below. What was the most significant part of this video to you? Was it the 4 questions that generally run through people's minds that we introduced the video with at the onset? Or was it actually forgetting the list price and focusing on what the house is really worth? Or was it perhaps how many different elements really go into writing an offer? Tell us in the comment section below. Now, if you haven't already done, I'm going to go ahead and pop up my contact information. If you need help finding a top agent where you live, or if you simply want to drop me a line and say hello, my contact info is on the screen and down below. Looking forward to hearing from you. I always love hearing what you guys have to say and what you're thinking. Now, if you haven't already done so, I'm going to ask you to do 3 things. Number 1, please subscribe to this channel. Number 2, please like this video. And number 3, please share this video around with someone you know is going to be able to help. In between now and next time, I'm wishing you and yours a lifetime full of love, wealth, abundance, and happiness. Enjoy an amazing day, team.